Hello and good morning from Cali in Colombia, where it's just gone 11 o'clock in the morning on the 6th day of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, COP16. That's the 16th conference of the parties to the convention. And today, Saturday, is sort of supposed to be a day off from the formal negotiations, same as tomorrow, Sunday. But actually, I guarantee you there's lots of negotiations going to be going on informally over the weekend with government delegations meeting in hotel rooms and talking on WhatsApp and having Teams calls and so on to move the discussion forward, even if the formal negotiations aren't taking place in the convention centre today. So there's been lots been happening this week. This is the 6th daily update from the Wildlife Trust about what's been happening at COP16. And thank you so much for all your views and all your feedback. I mean, there's thousands of people watching these daily updates. We're delighted with that. We're delighted with the feedback we're getting from you all. Keep that coming. Tell us where you're joining from today. That's fantastic to be able to see. And if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. You never know, we might just try and get to answer them if we possibly can. So we were going to offer you today a little video of interviews with UK parliamentarians that are here at COP. But actually, we're going to show that tomorrow. They are cracking, I have to tell you. This is a fantastic video of these interviews with parliamentarians. So don't miss that. We're going to be showing that at 5 o'clock UK time tomorrow for the daily update. And we're going to give you a little teaser at the end of this update as well. So look out for that. But anyway, first of all, my little update about what's been happening in the negotiations yesterday. There's been a number of themes that have been hotly debated between the almost 200 countries that are parties to the UN Convention. One of them is particularly the debate about whether the Global Environment Facility, which is the mechanism that's used by the rich countries to try and pay for nature restoration and preservation activities in the global south, the poor countries, there was a big debate whether that should be ring-fenced or increased. And these are sort of words that make a big difference in these negotiations. And there's a bit of a debate going on. I mentioned it earlier in the week as to whether some of the poorer countries want a whole new funding facility separate from the global environment facility, whereas the rich countries are tending to say they need to want to work with the global environment facility. So these are this is all code for basically having the big discussion about finance, and of course the fact that we need to see much greater levels of finance coming from the rich countries to the poor countries to help tackle the global nature crisis. It's worth saying that the UK government has said that they want the global biodiversity framework to be linked to the Ramsar Convention, which of course the Ramsar Convention is one for wetlands, and we think that makes sense, that there be a connection between the two in some form. And in the meantime, Australia is arguing that the cooperation agreement bit of the text also makes reference to international waters, which I think probably makes good sense. There's also been lots of conversations going on about how to draw better linkages between nature and climate change, and indeed between the two conventions on those as well. There's been a lot of disagreement in the halls over synthetic biology, which is sort of gene-edited biology. And obviously that's a hugely complicated issue. Some delegates have been bizarrely arguing for biosafety impact assessments to only consider the positive impacts of synthetic biology. I mean, this clearly seems ridiculous. You can have an argument about whether synthetic biology is good or bad, but to say that, to try and write in the text that you should only ever consider the supposed good impacts of genetically modified organisms and things like that is absolutely bizarre. And I think that just smacks of industry lobbying that goes on around a lot of these agreements, which is real concern. There's also some disagreements, I was saying before, about to what extent the global biodiversity framework should link to the Paris Agreement on climate or not. And there's been some discussions around that. But at the end of all that, on late last night, the chair noted all the hard work that the delegations have been doing negotiating this week and encouraged them to have a weekend off and visit the green zone. And I think we've talked before that you have the blue zone, which is where all the formal official negotiations take place, and you need security and you need official badges to get in. We've got those, but most people can't get into them. But the green zone is open to everyone. And there's now 40,000 people a day, mostly Colombians, all visiting the green zone. It's a fantastic, we went earlier in the week, and it's a fantastic space. And I think it just shows that, you do have these industry lobbyists, like the ones trying to encourage or trying to lobby to say that we should only ever consider the good side of synthetic biology, but actually, in reality, you've got hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world, 40,000 people here going into the green zone, celebrating the importance of nature and how we need to move much faster on tackling these challenges. So there are big disagreements still taking place, but I think we're seeing quite a lot of progress as well in some kind of key areas. So a lot going on, and a lot still riding on developments and further negotiations in this coming week. Now, in the context of this, one of the things we wanted to talk about in particular today was around the relationship between business and nature, and actually how it can be a good thing and not necessarily a bad thing with the bad lobbyists that we were just talking about. It can often be a good thing. And at the Wildlife Trust, we do a lot of work with business. Rob, you're particularly close to this. Tell us, give us some examples of some of the work that we do across the Wildlife Trust, working closely in partnership with business.
Yeah, I mean, this is really important. You know, across the globe, most nature conservation is actually done by the state. Britain's a little bit different, where big NGOs like us and RSPB and Woodland Trust are involved a lot in nature conservation. But of course, the biggest money flows are actually in the corporate sector. And we've done some amazing stuff actually in the UK with the Wildlife Trust. So just to give a few examples, we've been working with the quarrying industry. So it doesn't seem like easy bedfellows, but actually lovely report written probably 20 years ago now called Nature After Minerals, which showed that if you manage those quarries where they've been worked out for nature, you can get fantastic habitat. And there's some great examples. I mean, one of my old trusts, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, got Blashford Lakes, which is all ex-quarries, absolutely beautiful site.
I've been there, that is amazing.
It's a cracker, isn't it? A really good bird watching site. Brockholes in Lancashire is an ex-quarry, and that's just off the M6 motorway, really easy to get to.
Very good visitor centre as well.
A very nice visitor centre. North Cave Wetlands, a real birding mecca in East Yorkshire, another great example. Housing's another sector that we've worked quite closely with. Just to give one example, we extended Pottericar Nature Reserve in South Yorkshire as a result of developing a new housing estate by Persimmons, who worked hand in glove with Persimmon over that development, making sure they did it very well, lots of green space integrated into it, but also created this reserve extension. And probably one of the biggest programs that we've run is with the Highways England. And they've been looking at how they can kind of retrofit the biodiversity losses that have been created by creating the road network. And they've used the biodiversity net gain metric, not in a formal way, but just as a metric to quantify what benefits we could get. And that's turned into a £12 million programme, 52 projects, just to give you a couple of examples. Peatland restoration in Cumbria, fantastic, up again near the M6, but a bit further north, and coastal grassland restoration down on the Suffolk coast. So some lovely examples there.
Absolutely. We have so many good examples of how the Wildlife Trust can work in partnership with business for the good of nature. And perhaps one of the most spectacular examples of that has got a lot of attention over the last couple of years has been our brilliant partnership with Aviva to restore temperate rainforests. And we thought we'd just show you a little video that summarises the beauty of that partnership.
The Atlantic Rainforest Restoration Programme is essentially, in concept, a pretty simple project. We're going to acquire about 2,000 hectares of land, we're going to plant trees on that, and eventually those trees will turn from a young forest into wonderful, rich Atlantic rainforest that'll be there forever. It'll pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, we'll measure that carbon, and we can turn that into carbon units, and we'll give those carbon units to Aviva that can retire them out of the system as part of their journey to net zero.
I'm Zelda Bentham. I am the Group Head of Sustainability for Aviva. In 2021, we decided to set a new climate change strategy focused on us becoming net zero as a company by 2040. So as part of that strategy, we decided that we would fund £100 million worth of nature-based solutions. We wanted to work with real experts. So we chose the Wildlife Trust to provide us with some projects that would not only help sequester carbon, remove carbon from the atmosphere, but also have other co-benefits like public access for the local communities that would be there in perpetuity. that would help with restoration and enhancement of biodiversity. And also a little bit about research and understanding what we've actually lost as a country and how we can help get that back again. Our customers are increasingly becoming flooded by more intense rainfall, by more frequent rainfall. If we can hold that rain in the uplands, in the woodlands a little longer, then that will reduce the amount of flooding that we have and therefore provide more climate resilience to our customers. We felt like if we did something and kind of showed what could be done, that would encourage others to see what they could do.
When we heard that this fantastic farm was going to be on the market up just in the hills here above Clonogfawr, only because of the donation that the Wildlife Trust had received via Aviva were we even able to think about acquiring that piece of land. It's the chance to re-establish Celtic rainforest that once would have clothed the slopes of Bulchmawr here behind me, to manage a wonderful SSSI SAC designated wetland, and to demonstrate beyond that that the future of farming has a place here, and to take that vision out to others.
Well, that was amazing, wasn't it? I mean, it's such a good project. And, you know, that's one of the biggest corporate donations to British nature conservation ever, £40 million. That's a really amazing, serious commitment. I just want to say hello to Sue T in Leeds, and we were talking about quarries that have been turned into fantastic nature reserves. Just up the road from you, Sue, is Ripon City Wetlands. Do go and visit. That's managed by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. We worked with aggregates industries in that particular case. These are great examples, Craig, you know, and I think we're justifiably proud in the Wildlife Trust that we're working with business to try and improve nature. But if we're honest, this hasn't really been mainstreamed across the business community. It's not, I don't think it's in the collective endeavour of the boardrooms. How could we go about mainstreaming this type of approach?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, all too often we have these wonderful examples, but you know, everyone keeps coming back very often to the same examples because it hasn't been mainstreamed. At the Wildlife Trust, we do have something called Biodiversity Benchmark, which is where we work with companies to try and give them accreditation for how they're managing biodiversity on their land, and that's very important. There's obviously another example is the TNFD, which is the Task Force on Nature-Related Risks. And financial disclosures. We're going to hear a little bit about that in a moment. That's been a really important thing for trying to set a standard as to how financial institutions can disclose their risks around nature. But, you know, it really comes down to the fact that we do need governments to start to think about how they take these kind of examples of voluntary initiatives that have shown how companies can do the right thing and actually start setting sort of legal requirement and expectations in place that companies mainstream these. That's what it's going to need to be able to do it, because if we don't have that, then actually the good companies that are putting the effort in here can always be undercut and undermined by the bad companies that don't do it. So we've got to stop allowing, you know, the companies that are trying to undercut some of this work, stop them getting off the hook, and actually the governments have got to actually sort of put regulations or expectations in place.
Just to bring this back to the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is what's being discussed here today, is there's one of the targets there, I think it's target 19, I think, but is saying that we need to increase financing of nature restoration. So actually making something like TNFD mandatory, I mean, that's something that we were asking government to do, is more likely than for companies to invest in nature restoration.
That's exactly right, Rob. Target 19 calls on all countries to substantially and progressively increase the level of financial resources. It's understanding that some of that will come from the public sector, taxpayers, but actually a lot could and should come from the private sector as well. So Target 15 calls on governments to integrate legal, administrative or policy measures within business and financial institutions to help ensure the delivery of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So why don't we hear now a little bit from a really highly respected individual in this space, Andrew Mitchell, who did so much work around this and actually was one of the founders of TNFD.
One of the founders of the TNFD, along with Midori Paxton at UNDP in New York. So she's the mother of TNFD, and she calls me the father of TNFD. And I've been the vice chair of it up until just a week ago when I stepped down.
Fantastic. Now, TNFD, to explain what the acronym means and why TNFD is so important.
Well, the acronym means the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. So, in a sense, it was my attempt to apply a little bit of acupuncture to the finance sector and on nature. You see, we have trillions of dollars flowing around the world. It's destroying nature and doing the wrong thing. But from the finance sector's perspective, they don't know that they're doing the wrong thing. It doesn't show up in their terminals, and they don't have to report on the footprint they have on nature. So the idea was, could we create a reporting and disclosure framework for them, for banks, insurers, investors, so that they could understand the language of nature, begin to manage the risks they face from the degradation of nature, understand their dependencies on it, and then start to create new systems that would lighten their footprint on nature. So we launched TNFD in 2001. We spent 2 years working on this, and just in September last year, in 2023, we published this framework for nature for the finance sector. And what's amazed me is it's taken off very fast. And now 450 organizations use it around the world before there's any regulation, and we're going to announce a whole lot more here at COP16.
Absolutely. Well, one of course the big industry sectors that impacts on biodiversity most is that of agriculture and big agri-tech, agri-food industries as well. And you know, it's an interesting one because of course we all need food to survive, so we need that to continue being produced, but it does have a huge negative impact on nature so often in the way it's produced. And Rob, this is something you've worked on in particular a lot over the years, that impact of agriculture, but we can also have nature-friendly farming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's 80% of Britain's land use, which is one of the highest percentages of land use across the world. So just to bring it back to the Global Biodiversity Framework again, this is relating to Target 10 of the framework about sustainable agriculture, forestry and fishing. So this is really critical we get this right in the UK, and we need to ensure that farming and nature can work alongside each other, and it absolutely can. So on our more productive soils, what we need to do is put aside maybe 10 or 30% of the farm, the bits of the farm that are difficult to actually produce food on. We're talking about the field boundaries, the field corners, the little bits that are too wet for farming and so on, and really manage those for wildlife. You're kind of creating a very good food production system and wildlife on the farm. But then for our more marginal soils, so I'm thinking particularly out in the south of England, in the west of Wales, or in large parts of Scotland and so on, you know, actually we can create a concept where nature's recovery is really driving the business of farming. And we've been working with some consultants looking at a report that we wrote called The Sweet Spot, and it introduces this concept of maximum sustainable output. So that's a great
I love that report. It's such a good report.
It's really useful. I mean, what it basically says is that if you overproduce on your land, your costs go up so much, your profits actually begin to go down. So there's a sweet spot where you maximize your profits, and it relates to the ecological carrying capacity of your land. And typically that's at 25% less stocking. So it's 25% of your total sheep numbers or cattle numbers out on those upland moors. Now, if you dropped your numbers of sheep to 25%, you're going to get more wildlife, so you're not overgrazing the hills. You're also going to make more profit. And this,
and the reason, just to be clear about this is because the cost of those inputs, those artificial inputs, whether you're talking fertilizers or antibiotics, all of these things, they're so expensive now, farmers, that actually this kind of old-fashioned model of just trying to throw ever more at the land to get ever more output, actually it's just not working.
Yeah, so think about that. You know, if you've got cattle out on the hills, if you've got too many cattle, it's not enough food. So you bring them into housing, you know, bring them into sheds. Well, that's just expensive. And of course, they're all shoved in together, so they get ill. So you've got more veterinary costs, and you're bringing in feed from outside, or supplementary feed, often, you know, soya grown in a place like the tropics here in Colombia, resulting in deforestation and so on.
So we really can have less is more.
So less is more, you know, it's a really interesting thing. And I think in the end, this introduces this concept of a just transition for farming. So for on our upland farms, we might envisage things like niche local food production, really high quality stuff for the restaurant trade, nature tourism, state support for those non-market benefits like wildlife conservation, like carbon sequestration, and of course green finance. And we'll come back to green finance later on. And I think this just transition, again, it relates back to the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 22, this respect for the rights of local communities. So who am I to tell an upland farmer to change their way of farming? What we do in the Wildlife Trust is not tell people to do stuff. We work alongside people to make their businesses more profitable and bring back wildlife in a purely voluntary way.
Fantastic, good. Well, yeah, this is obviously such a huge area, and if you want to see the Sweet Spot report, my colleagues will be putting links to that in the chat. It's a really important, quite a technical report, but if you want to hear about how less can be more in agriculture, both in terms of food production and for nature, do look at that report. I want to give a big shout out to people watching on Instagram live today. There's definitely is a Wendy, Mark, Sally and Mary all watching. Hi to Charlotte, who's been really enjoying his COP updates, been working with the Irish Sea Network, so particularly of marine interested in that. That's fantastic. Hello to Simon joining from Surrey Hills National Landscape. Hello also to Steve joining from Stroud, beautiful Stroud in Gloucestershire.
Oh, and just because I was talking about farming, a lovely example really. So if you go up above Stroud, there's a place called Hawkwood. It's got a community farm.
We know it well.
Beautiful limestone grasslands around it. It's a great example of farming and nature working alongside each other. Carry on, Craig.
It really is. It's absolutely fantastic. So anyway, we'll be considering more around the subject of green finance on Monday. Actually, we're going to go and speak to one of our friends from Aviva over in the Blue Zone this afternoon and do a little interview with her for the Monday thing. And also we've been speaking, as I said, to UK MPs, members of Parliament that are out here at COP16 to help the government focus on a nature positive future as part of economic growth. An economic growth that creates unlivable hellscape in the future cannot be considered as progress. So we at the Wildlife Trust are calling on the UK government to ensure that all green infrastructure is mandatory for all new developments, so that actually when the new Labour government is talking about building 1.5 million homes, let's make sure that we build that at the same time as restoring nature in and around those developments and improving green space. And as we learned earlier in the week, that's good for people's health as well. Actually look at how they can mandate something like the TNFD reporting for large companies. We have things like the Das Gupta review on the economics of biodiversity, a really amazing report that was done, commissioned by the UK Treasury a few years ago. And actually we need to, rather than that just sitting on the sort of metaphorical shelf gathering dust, we absolutely need Rachel Reeves to be picking it up, dusting it down and making sure they implement the recommendations in that brilliant report. So make sure, we're sort of running out of time today for today's report now, but do make sure that you join us tomorrow for that very special interview with UK MPs that are here in Cali in Colombia. And we're going to play out today with a little teaser of that. And if you haven't already signed up for the daily updates for us, make sure you follow the QR code at the end of the program that shows you how you can sign up for our daily email updates from Cali in Colombia as well. But that's it for today. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. And here's a little insight to those discussions with those MPs. Thanks and have a great Saturday.
Works together to solve those problems, then actually we all go down the plug together.
I'm here with stories, poems, photographs of constituents who've told me their fears, their hopes.
I think we all feel that it's our role back in Parliament to in a friendly way, keep the government's feet to the fire.
But what they want is us to work together.
And that's why we're here in Cali, is to say that this ambition exists at every level of Parliament.
Tewkesbury feels the effects of climate change, and as that water table rises, Tewkesbury is impacted as much as anywhere else.
But I think what we've seen is that there is a real actual leadership by Colombia, which is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, second most biodiverse country in the world.
So these are things that go to people's hearts and minds. They want to see species in their gardens continuing to thrive, and they know that it takes local action but also global action here.
This is about optimism for the future. This is people coming together to solve the problems.